video here. Okay, we're live here with a temporary fix while we work on getting another camera up and live. Although that light overhead doesn't work too well. So we're trying to, let's see. Echo. You're live in the meeting also? Mm-hmm. You're not using your camera?
No, I'm joined in from as a guest, so I'm seeing it from a guest point of view.
Oh, I thought you would join in. Don't you have your own login?
For what, Ring Central?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I thought we all had our own. I figured we'd get two computers up and running. You'd be on one and I'd be on the other. We could just talk, but if you don't have a login.
For Ring Central?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have the login for Ring Central? Okay. Do I need the...
Go in here. Get on.
Well, there's no webcam. Let me try this. I was going to do it through Facebook. Let's try. I thought you were setting up an actual.
No, we're live. No, we are. We're live in my office. This is my office computer right here. So we're casting Ring Central live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube right now.
Okay.
So everything we're doing right now is live on all of the pages. Well, no, that's the computer password.
World headquarters.
It would be for the whole thing.
Just don't understand why I get the camera. No, the ID code. For you to be live on here. So your ID, the ID code.
Well, I know. It's signing for the extension.
Go back on it.
What's the sign you're signing?
Your email maybe? Up here, the phone number that is. The phone number is 888 774 8488. And then
The extension you have.
yeah, your extension. And then whatever your password was for something like that. Just trying to have one on. Password, one password. Oh my God, it was 2 hours for the viewing, and then they just started the service while I left.
How long
Yeah, a long time ago.
Oh.
Yes, Ring Central meeting. That's 364-6866-048. Galaxy 8S or S8 Plus just came on. There you go. Now you're live. So we've got your picture. We don't have. I think we got this audio from you.
Turn that off. Hopefully they can hear me through the rest of it then.
Yeah, they can hear you.
Let's try this. Am I supposed to be able to see you on the screen or what?
Well, it depends if you get or how do you want to see it down there in the picture. You can see yourself. On mine, I just hit the share. See, like here on this, you can get a split screen. At the very top corner of mine, when I'm touching the picture,
Right.
a little thing comes up and says, speaker view or full screen. I just keep the camera on and off.
Oh, there we go.
Everybody,
Now we got three.
you got me, you got my office, and then you've got the speaker over here that the camera's not coming on with. I'm trying to iPad data to run since his camera's not functioning. Then need that iPad to run a meeting.
The video is stopped.
4,
Let's try
8, 6, 6, 0, 4, 8.
Jesse's iPad joined. Oh, there you
Okay. Hello.
go.
Hello. Just a second.
Right. No, not everybody else is going to.
Are we good, man?
No.
No, I don't have to go get.
Alright, so I put my speaker up. I have to speak. Maybe the two of them going back and forth at the same time.
Possible. Let me see if we can log in over here to Facebook once and make sure that we've got. Twitter.com. I think we might be able to hear both of us all through this one microphone here. I think he has plugged in. You can hear it through the phone? Yeah. Well, I've got the audio to that off, So the only audio that I'm collecting is from this computer, okay, which would be this microphone.
Let me turn this back on and see if you can hear me over there.
I can hear you over here when you're talking.
Okay.
And see, it drops to, on my screen, it drops to speaker view, which means whoever we're hearing talking, this microphone here picking it up, is who I'm seeing. You're just looking at yourself. Okay. So we should be good, I think. Let me just double check on Twitter, make sure that we're seeing things, seeing and hearing things live on Twitter real quick. Log in, Twitter.
I'm trying to log into Facebook, see if I can. Because as of right now, we've got no guests.
Correct. Other than you.
Other than me. Let's go to Facebook.
I can hear you typing.
Yeah, let's.
So yeah, we're live there on Twitter. Yeah, see there we are live. Let's hit this and see if we can hear some audio. Yes. Yeah, I can hear it coming through Twitter now. We're good. So that should be pushing to Facebook, Twitter, and it's got us all on live with YouTube also. Okay, so guys, Jesse Storm, Brokers Realty, with me here that you're seeing live from the world headquarters of Brokers Realty is Kingsley Harmer. Am I saying that correctly? Kingsley is not only a realtor, but he specializes in writing loans to help buyers and people looking to buy homes get approvals and get a mortgage for your purchase. So last week we were talking a good bit about different types of loans, FHA loans, USDA loans. We were talking about the differences between VA and some different things like that. So what we wanted to do was bring Kingsley on live with us so we can talk with him and ask him a few questions about mortgages and how these things can really make or break an entire deal. A lot of times folks decide that they want to go out and house shop first and then call a realtor second, and the lender's usually the last guy in that line, and then they don't understand why the biggest purchase of their life has all kinds of issues and stress and anxiety. So Kingsley, could you tell us a little bit about the stress level in a mortgage?
Well, you've got stress from pretty much every angle that you have a person looking to buy a home. The biggest thing, as you say, Jesse, is finding the home you think is your dream home, then trying to, after finding it, then trying to go out and say, okay, let's get this whole thing rolling, get it under contract, and buy a home. Come to find out you've got anything on your credit that's going to hold you back or maybe not qualify you for the exact program that you're looking to get. It could be something that popped up on your credit a month ago that you had no idea was still hanging out there. So getting pre-qualified at the very least, weeks or even days before you decide to start hunting for a home is highly recommended. After the fact that you've got a home under contract, the stress level goes up, but so does the good anxiety and the happy, moving into a home. So it's an all-around anxious time, a 30 to 45 day time frame.
So Kingsley, when we're looking at a VA loan, because there's a lot of VA buyers out in the market currently. When we're looking at buying with a VA loan, are there any nuances that people should know about? And are there any nuances why a veteran should come to you or any lender first before they start looking for a house to buy?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, as a VA, you need to know that you're eligible. So you need to get a certificate of eligibility. Typically, you can get them done online. It all depends on your terms of service. For example, I think off the top of my head, 6 months or 6 years in the reserves you need to be in to be eligible. I believe it's 3 months of wartime and 6 months of peacetime. But I mean, that's not written in stone or black and white. You really just need to check with the VA to make sure you're eligible for your benefits. Another thing that most people don't realize, I think they may have had a VA loan 10, 15 years ago and think that since they've already used it once, they're not eligible again. You actually can reuse your VA eligibility over and over and over again, as long as that's paid off, each time you use it. So there's even circumstances that you can carry 2 homes, depending on how much your eligibility is. So one of the things you want to, be certain of before heading out there is guessing. Just like getting pre-qualified, it really takes, 10, 15 minutes over the phone, some basic documents to get a pre-approval. For example, our company, and I'm sure a lot of the other mortgage companies out there, have incentives to get pre-approved, which is more or less an actual approval. You hand in your documents, pay stubs, your W-2s, show that you have assets or down payment for your home, and an underwriter will actually take your file, stamp an approval, even before you go looking for a home. And in doing so, the company will actually pay for your appraisal, which is upwards of $600 in a lot of cases. So it really is imperative to get pre-qualified before you go out. Aside from, from a realtor standpoint, they're investing a lot of time, money, gas, resources in trying to find your perfect home. So I don't want to say imperative, but there are a lot of realtors out there that will not even work with buyers that haven't taken the time to get pre-qualified, because let's face it, it really doesn't take that much time. You'll get people to come out, I've got great scores and I make plenty of money. But, then you go to get pre-qualified and you come to find out that they had a bankruptcy last year, or, maybe they didn't think that their child support or alimony actually counts towards debt to income ratio. All these little things can pop up. So it doesn't hurt to just be sure ahead of time. No.
Great, Kingsley. I really appreciate you going in depth with that. With veterans, you've got to get a certificate of eligibility for, your VA loan. So when we're talking about a certificate of eligibility, a lot of vets seem like they want to try and run around and get that certificate of eligibility themselves before they do anything. And they think that once they have that certificate of eligibility, that suddenly they're just approved to buy a home. And, what I found, and I might be completely wrong with this, but I think that lenders can assist in getting that certificate of eligibility a lot easier because they've done it multiple times.
They can.
And also, just because you have the certificate of eligibility doesn't mean you're approved to buy a home. Is that correct?
Oh, that is correct. I mean, all the VA loan does is guarantee your loan. Okay, it guarantees a set amount of your loan. Okay, so with that being said, there are VA guidelines, and depending on the bank that you go to, they'll have guidelines, what they call overlays, that are in addition to what your standard VA guidelines are. So, for example, I'm not big into naming banks, but let's just say your local bank, who is traditionally a conforming vanilla type bank, probably has some overlays. You've probably heard 620 credit score or above. Wow, that's considered an overlay when it comes to VA loans or FHA loans. but there are a bunch of lenders out there that will actually, in fact, write down to lower credit scores. So you still want to get pre-qualified at the end of the day. You want to make sure you're qualified. If you think you do qualify and your credit scores are above 580, then you just might need to find another bank.
Kingsley, is there a minimum or a minimum threshold for VA credit scores?
Typically, 580 is your threshold.
Okay, so if a lender tells you that if you don't have a 680 credit score or 660 or 640 credit score, that doesn't mean that you can't get it there. That means that that particular lender doesn't have a source to sell that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, every bank has an investor that they're going to sell off to. Not every single, but most. Okay, so again, that is what's called an overlay. So if a bank says you need a minimum of 660 score, that isn't necessarily the case because the VA only requires a minimum of 580. Now we're talking about a straight purchase because if you're doing a cash on refi to 100%, typically you're going to be higher than 580. I think 600 is typically the threshold for that. But bottom line is 580 is the absolute minimum for a VA. And if you have anything over a 580 and a bank is telling you during a purchase that our minimum credit score is 640 or you need a 640, get a second opinion. Find somebody that will write down to 580 to start off with. And then if there's something within the parameters or guidelines that says you don't qualify, it could be debt to income ratio, or maybe no reserves, maybe no assets. I don't know if these pop up, but get a second opinion.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. I mean, I know that I personally work with quite a few veterans. I've worked with hundreds of veterans over your career in both real estate and lending. Here at BrokersRealty.com, we specialize in a lot of different programs for veterans, cash active veterans, just tons and tons of different programs out there to assist veterans. And that's why I want to talk about veterans do it first. When a veteran is looking to buy a home and they get their certificate of eligibility and you help them get that, and then they get their qualification letter that they're qualified to buy for X amount of dollars. We don't like $200,000 or maybe that's $80,000. Because here at Brokers Realty, we don't care what the price of the home is because we think there's a home out there for every buyer and seller. But once they have that approval and know what their price point is, can they buy a fixer upper with a VA loan?
A fixer upper is a bit of a challenge. Now, I have heard that there are programs which we do not have, so I'm not the end-all be-all answer for this. I have heard of a VA 203K-ish loan that is out there where you can actually have it purchased with a home that needs some improvements, and those improvements can be funded in the loan. We do not have that for VA currently. We have FHA, regular conventional type loans, but I believe that is possible.
Yeah, I've never come across that myself for a veteran to get a home that needs repairs. Now, that's not to say that a veteran can't buy a home that has been previously loved, but generally it meets the minimum requirements about the peeling paint, chipping paint. The roof needs to be in good repair.
And general safety concerns.
General safety concerns, the furnace, so that they're, functioning, things need to be functioning. Now, I think there's places out there, Annie Mac, I think Home Bridge has some kind of like little fixer-up program that they can add on as a second loan, but it's not your typical 203K rehab loan. So I haven't seen those yet. Not that they may be out there, and I just haven't seen one.
I believe they're out there. Again, I haven't come across it personally. I've heard about them. And also keep in mind, for a lot of VAs that need to alter their home, let's say for health reasons. There's a lot of programs now, especially in central Pennsylvania, through PHFA, that will finance those types of things into the home as a second mortgage.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good programs out there now to where we can get wheelchair ramps put in. We can remodel kitchens to have wheelchair accessibility, showers, bathrooms. I've seen a lot of those. I mean, I've even seen them as far as going 200% over market value on it to put an elevator in to handicap equip the home. I mean, there's some weird ones that I've seen out there over the past 7-8 years, but they're not typical. And a lot of times it's a specialty program that's a one-off by the government. So with that, when we step away from VA and we start getting into the next type of loan that I see very common in Lancaster County, but isn't probably quite as common in some of the other areas that we've got audience watching us with and talking to us from. And that's USDA. And we're not talking about your meat. We're not talking about your steak. We're not talking about your chicken. USDA is a rural housing redevelopment loan to stimulate development and living in rural communities. So with that type of loan, my understanding is, Kingsley, that you can't buy a house within in certain proximities of population, and the USDA.gov website actually has a program for home buyers and realtors to check eligibility of location for the home, and then it has overlays on their loan from USDA for repairs and condition also. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with USDA loans?
USDA is, I haven't had an experience with the improvement 203K version of them. USDA is just a great program for people that don't have a lot of money, especially in our area. I mean, if you go to the outskirts of Lancaster, York County, Cumberland County, even Dauphin County, there are surprising amounts of areas that you would think are not considered to be rural, that are really suburban. For example, world headquarters here is USD eligible, and I would consider this suburban.
But you can't use USDA for commercial, okay?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll strictly residential. Hey, I'm sure weird things have happened, and I know you've put together some funky deals in the past, but that's out of my wheelhouse. So strictly residential properties. But I mean, if you don't have a whole lot of money, the cool thing is with USDA, and Jesse can attest because he's been doing this for years, you can couple in seller's concessions to account for the lack of cash with the USDA. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Now, Kingsley, you had said something twice about not having a lot of cash. So is USDA just for the home buyer that has little money in their bank account?
No. I mean, that's generally what people think of because there's no down payment, quote unquote. But USDA typically has lower mortgage insurance rates, which is also helpful. There's also different programs within USDA that can help buy homes. USDA does have rural, as far as farmland and agricultural programs that we do not work with, but they do have those. So I'm sure they're more prevalent in Lancaster County to use them for those types of scenarios. But now, you've got programs coming out now. I don't want to say it's scary, like prior to 2007 scary, because, verifications are very, very highly, scrutinized as far as income and assets and that sort of thing. But for example, we have a 100% program for non-rural areas. It's just our program that we write, we service. So you could buy a home in Lancaster, for 100%, barring, good credit. But So at the end of the day, I mean, the funny thing is we talk about all these different programs, but there are so many outlets. There are so many secondary programs, PHFA, county programs, VA in particular. They even have one for the Angel Fund that, you know, they will put down 2% if you put up 1%. So you can walk into a home with 3% equity for nothing other than applying for it. So there's so many programs. There's no excuse to not call, not find out, and ask about it. It's just a matter of having the knowledge and knowing where to look.
Would you suggest a savvy home buyer use USDA? Let's say you had a home buyer sitting there with $30,000 in their bank account, and they were originally thinking they were going to buy a $220,000 home and put $30,000 down on it, go FHA or go conventional, and they just can't find that perfect home. But they have found homes that are in the area that they like. The size meets what they want. And for the most part, it's a good home, but the paint is horrible. And the floors just need updating. And the kitchen needs updating. Would you suggest a home buyer take out a USDA loan, do zero down, and then take $20,000, $25,000 of their cash reserves then and put into remodeling to make that home perfect for their needs, seeing as how there's such a tight market for good real estate right now?
That's going to be a loaded question. The first question I would ask is, does the market bear the improvements that you're going to put in the home? Are you going to get your money back out of it? Is it going to improve the value of the home? First, is it going to be your last home, or are you going to be there 5 to 7 years, which is the national average? So are you going to put $25,000 or $25,000 in your home that you're not going to get back out? So financing 100% may or may not be the best option. You know, there's if you have the equity in the home and the market value will support, you've got the 203K, you've got the home remedy, which is the conventional side of it. I would keep the cash finance as long as the market value is there and go that route. Now, with that being said, there's new programs now. You can't find the perfect home to build.
Yeah, there's some good builder programs out there. I've seen those. One of my suggestions that I've made to some clients recently in the past that just couldn't find the perfect home, we switched them to a conventional 5% down renovation loan that one of the lenders that I work with a lot had just come out onto the market with. It's a new package for them. So they put 5% down, and then they took out a second loan, 203 style loan on the house for $38,000 to remodel the house. And then it all got rolled together as one full loan once the remodel and repairs and everything were done. It appraised just fine prior and after the repairs were done. And
that's
then,
just the key.
And then what they did was they took $30,000 and we went out and we bought 3 rental properties for them. And now they have $1,500 a month income from 3 rental properties. And you know, they wanted to invest that money. They were thinking investing it into their primary house. But then if you connect with a property manager, like I explained to them, if you get a good property manager who's going to make sure that they're on top of the property and renting the place out, they went ahead and did that, got a property manager, hired a real estate brokerage to manage the property for them.
Can't imagine doing that.
And then, reinvested that $30,000 in 2 of the houses that we had bought. Needed a little work to them, but they were already rented. And the 3rd house was vacant that needed a little bit of work to it, because you're not going to get 3 houses in primo locations that are in good condition for $30,000. But you can get 3 houses that need a little bit of work in different areas for 30 grand. So we used the money from the first two to do the repairs enough to get it up and sufficient for the third one to get rented. And now they're just sitting there collecting some of that money and using that to pay themselves back for the 30 grand. And then they're going to reinvest that once a tenant moves out to do the remodel, and then they'll be able to jack their rent money up a little higher on each one, you know, at a time, one at a time as tenants move out of the property. And then they called me back, and we did this a couple of months ago, and they called me back the other day and said, you know, you really made out well with our first home. We bought it down in Delta on the trails down there, and you know, they were from Maryland, and they really wanted to get their first home. They were in their early 20s, and let's just say that the wife turned 21 after they bought their second home.
Starting off the correct way.
You know, so they bought the house on the trails. They did some work to that themselves, and they called me back and said, Jesse, we want to sell this. And I said, well, okay, but, you know, we kind of maxed you out at income buying that. Well, we both have gotten new jobs, better paying jobs in the past year and a half. And we've done a bunch of work to the house and sweat equity. What do you think we can sell it for? And I said, well, remember when you bought it, we offered $154, and when the appraisal came back in, it only appraised for $148. We had the seller to drop it even further because it was on the market for $169.99. I said, so I don't know in a year and a half that the market's gone up that much, so you're probably not going to get much more. And their original loan was a USDA loan on that house.
But the market has gone up.
It has gone up, but it hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone up a ton. In Delta Ridge, on the trails, you know. So I went down and looked at it, and I was kind of flabbergasted. I mean, they repainted the whole property. They redid some woodwork. The husband worked for Blue Dot out of Maryland, so he put in mini splits. So he had central heat, and central air, and he says, you know, really, it cost you $2,000 in material. You know, a $15,000 heating and cooling system cost them $2,000. So guys, just out there for reference, negotiate with Blue Dot. There's money on the table.
They're not going to like it now.
But, you know, so he put this system in, and I told him, I said, you know, what do you want to sell it for? And he said, well, if we can sell it for $164, I think we'll get enough out of it to put down on another house. With the income that we're making off of the rentals now and our increased rentals, our increased income, we should be able to buy something a little bit bigger. And we want to go over to Fawn Grove or the outer edge and do one more house before we buy that permanent house in Maryland. Because this whole thing is a stepping stone for us to get up and get the house that we want in Maryland close to our family, because we both still work in Maryland. And I said, okay. I said, well, if you want 164, everybody wants to negotiate, so we're going to have to list this a little higher to get this number if you want it. About 5 months ago.
Okay.
And so we listed it for 166. I went down and I did my aerial photos. I did my professional photography on the house. I did a Matterport on the house. And, you know, the crazy thing was this house was for sale for 2.5 years before they bought it. We sold it in 2.5 weeks. Full price, no seller help. Now, we sold it for the $169.9. The appraisal, on a different note, came in at $164. So we had to lower the price on the appraisal.
But you ended up getting
what he was hoping to get out of it. But in the same token, what he did, a year and a half. I mean, so it was a good increase in value. So yeah, so they then at that point had about $22,000 between the money they were making off the rental properties and the money that they made off of the sale of the house. And we went over into Fawn Grove and bought them a $220,000 home with I think it was a 5% down loan. that they had used on buying that as a conventional. And it just blew them away that, here they are now, a house 3 times the size of what they had. We negotiated a really good deal on it.
And they still have the rental property.
And they still have the 3 rental properties, still have that income. And the crazy thing is the rental properties make more than enough now to pay their mortgage payment every month. So they're virtually living with no monthly cost in a bigger home. And the money they were paying on their USDA loan on the trails, they're now saving up. And they had just called me the other day looking to potentially buy a second or a third, fourth or fifth rental, because what they're thinking is if they can get 2 more rentals, those 2 rentals will cover the taxes on all 5 of them, plus pay their utility costs, so they have no cost of living expense outside of those rentals, which is a good idea. And if folks want to do it that way, and you've got some extra cash to do it, that might be the route to go and invest into some. But see, now they're totally hands off on their rentals cases. They don't.
They have it built in with their property manager.
Their property manager handles everything for them. They get an electronic deposit, in their bank account every month with their proceeds.
Right. Well, I'm sure you've heard of British Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of you have. And one of the stories that comes out of that book, or in general, is I'd like to buy a new car, which it's hard for him to spend, $75,000 for the Mercedes anymore. So what he did to justify it was, let me buy this property and cash flow it so that it will pay for my Mercedes. And that's in essence what they're doing. They're doing it at such a young age. They're setting themselves up for the future and having, all that extra income in cash that they can invest in other ones or something else.
And these kids weren't even married at the point they started this. When they bought their first house together, they weren't married at that point. 3 months after being in their first home and 3 weeks after owning 3 rental properties. So they had 4 real estate transactions in their belt at that point in time. And then they got married. How many months? It was about 4.5, 5 months.
So 5 months they bought 4 properties, 4.
Yeah,
had income
and cash flow. Yeah.
And then they sold their house a year and a half later, doubled the size of their house, tripled the size of their house, which is now in essence being paid for because of their initial investment.
And you have loans out there for investors who have a couple of rental properties like this? Are you getting those, those infamous wrap loans that they can tie up 3 or 4 rental properties to finance the purchase of 2 or 3 more?
They're blanket what they call them. I think there's plenty of that out there. I've done plenty of them for investors. Now it's getting a little bit looser as far as how many properties you can own and still purchase, primary residence or more rental properties. And there's even more aggressive purchases out there that you can buy, let's say, a dinged up property for 90% and finance a lot of the rehab costs on that and then convert it to a long-term rental or flip it and sell it for the investment, whatever you want to do. So there's so many programs out there right now. It's crazy.
Well, Kingsley,
especially for investments.
Since we're talking about such a young couple buying their first home and their investment properties, a lot of times when I hear people come to me, they say, "Hey, I was told that I was approved for the first-time home buyers program." And I look at them and say, "Well, what was the name of the program?" "Oh, the first-time home buyer, FHA thing, 3.5% down." Can you tell us really what that FHA mortgage or loan is? I think a lot of lenders scapegoat people into FHA and insist that they use FHA, calling it a first-time home buyers.
Yeah, I don't know why they call it that. I mean, I can take my guesses as far as why they hint at it being first-time home buyers, because FHA is a lot more forgiving credit. So for example, you've heard of conventional Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. That's traditionally your 620 and above credit scores that you need. You know, they don't want to see bankruptcies or foreclosures in the last, few years or 7 years for Fannie Mae. Although that's kind of drifting down. So if you've had a lot of hiccups or if you've had a lot of speed bumps over the last few years, FHA is a whole lot more forgiving. So, for example, you can have charge-offs with an aggregate up to $2,000. They may have stretched to $3,000 now. And let's say an old phone bill from a couple of years ago or an old electric bill. So, first-time home buyer, I think they're stretching that a little bit because each county in Pennsylvania has a first-time home buyer program. And first-time home buyer meaning it can be your first house or you haven't had home ownership in the last 3 years for most of them. That's how most of them go. And that's down payment assistance. So, you know, if you're looking, you don't have a whole lot of funds, you have good credit scores, you can couple an FHA loan with the down payment assistance programs. And together with those programs, you know, could you call it first-time home buyers? Yes. Is there any specific program just for first-time home buyers? Not really, because there's so many programs out there that can all, in essence, be for first-time home buyers.
Well, see, now in Lancaster County, Kingsley, you're in a different market up here at the world headquarters. But in Lancaster County, we have some programs down there that goes through LHOP.
And I've heard of that.
Lancaster County Housing Opportunity Partners.
Right.
And LHOP is a great program. They specialize in that first-time home buyers program. And what they do is they give up to 4%, maximum $10,000 towards the down payment and closing costs of somebody's primary residence. But now there's a catch-22 to that. It's a silent second loan with 0% interest that always stays on the home. And when you sell it, they get their money back.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not FHA itself with a conventional loan is not per se a first-time home buyers program. It's the county assistance programs. And for example, LHOP is one of them. PHFA is another one that has similar programs where they have the second mortgages that there's a couple of them. There's actually about 5 different programs for PHFA in particular, where 20% of them will drop off over the first 5 years, and then it'll actually go away. Some of them, however, like you said, will stay with the property at 0% interest for as long as you own the home. You don't, have to pay it back. But if you do sell the home, then you have to pay them back. So,
now, Kingsley, why don't lenders tell buyers about these programs? What is it about PHFA or these LHOP programs? Why don't all lenders tell their clients to go in and sign up, pay the $50 at LHOP, and sit through the educational class? Because anybody should really sit through that educational class. The educational class is basically just a supportive thing to teach people how to budget their income, budget for their mortgage, budget for their bills, and how they should set aside a little nest egg for the future, and not get themselves into a hardship position for income. Why is it that lenders don't tell buyers about these programs?
Well, I can give you a simple answer. Most of these programs you have to, as a lender, you have to subscribe to. So not every lender that's out there is part of PHFA or LHOP. For example, we're not part of LHOP, but we are part of PHFA, and that's part of, for me, kind of, pushing and pulling teeth to try and get to be part of that because it is such a great program. At the very least, the education alone, going into it is worth the cost of entry, so to speak. So if your lender isn't part of it, they're not going to push it, number one. You have to pay it as a lender a substantial fee just to become part of it, to become eligible to have these programs. And these are mostly all second mortgages. Most of them, they require a decent credit score. They want to see that you're responsible. A lot of these are actually second mortgages
that you're going to have to actually pay them. So your debt to income ratio has to fall within that. But short answer is not every lender wants to pay to play. And if you're a national lender like we are, you have this program, LHA, you've got Dauphin County assistance, Cumberland County assistance, all different programs that you have to either A, sign up for, have your underwriters understand all of the program guidelines with them. But now multiply that by every single county in Pennsylvania, then Ohio, and so on. It becomes a huge logistical nightmare. So for the local guys like myself, and I'm sure one of the ones that you work with, that is part of LHOP and or PHFA, it is a huge integral part for first-time homebuyers in the area. So there's the short version, long version, however you want to look at it. Basically, not every lender is a part of those programs, so they're not going to push it, and they're going to make it sound like it's not worth it. But at the end of the day, if you've got decent credit, why not? I mean, it's just a help for the down payment assistance and closing costs for that matter. So you can couple that with seller's concession, USDA loans, the whole 9 yards, and then take the money that you've got, as we just went through that scenario, invest in a few rental properties with the right guidance. Don't just go out there and jump into buying a house in downtown New York. Not necessarily the best thing to do. Been there, done that. So go with, somebody that's been down that road to help direct you. And I think the most important part of it is having somebody cover your property management. It's one less headache to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to those types of things, you're thinking it's because there's so many programs out there that it really makes it difficult for the lenders to really be part of every program. What I was kind of hinting around at is my understanding is that the lenders don't get paid as much when they write those PHFA loans. Is that true?
That is a yes and a no answer. In order to be part of, let's say, for PHFA and LHOP, they cap the lender at how much they can make and or charge the borrower. Because at the end of the program, for example, in PHFA's particular scenario, they will service the loan after it closes. So they get to choose how much a lender can make and or charge. So in our particular case, it doesn't change anything that I do. Front end, back end, doesn't matter. I mean, I'll get that loan versus any other loan 10 days a week and 10 times on Sunday. So there are some that do, I think, charge a lot more or try to charge a lot more. And to them, it's not worth going through the hassle because it is a whole lot more paperwork as well on our end, underwriting and processing.
So for those lenders who I've talked to in the past that said, that an FHA loan pays 1 point, let's just give an example, and a PHFA only pays a half a point or 3/4 of a point. I think they supposedly raised how much they were paying out recently, and that their lending institution just doesn't like doing them because they don't make any money off of them. There's no profit in it for them. Is that Butkus?
I can't speak for any other lender as far as why they do or do not want to do the loans. I can tell you, that we do the loans. I can tell you that depending on the program, there's probably a lot of times that the company doesn't make as much. But at the end of the day, we're helping out another client, and it's another loan. I don't want to say gives back to the community, but it certainly does help the community, and it does help home ownership numbers. So I think the program's great. And like I said, at the end of the day, I'll write that loan any day of the week. It doesn't change my, inner workings or office or any of that on a day-to-day basis whatsoever. the processors that I work with have, a couple more pieces of paper that they got to go through. And we actually have to, at corporate, have a specific underwriting team go through those loans and that paperwork, because there is a specific way that each one of, PHFA has that you have to be able to submit the loan. So, long story short, probably, but I'm certainly not going to speak to, why they do not do it.
Okay. So we've covered USDA loans, we've covered VA loans. We've got the FHA we started to touch on, and some of the other programs that are out there. One of the good, bad, and uglies of loans is something that is a cuss word in my world, and that's
mortgage insurance?
No, DTI, debt to income ratio.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people don't realize that there's a front-end load and a back-end load. And you can be disqualified for a loan because your front end has too high of a ratio and your back end meets what your ratio should be on the back end.
It can.
I mean, I recently seen that happen with a fellow where the front end ratio was too high. I think it was an FHA, what was it, 24% or something on the front end ratio or something weird. And then the back end,
Usually
28, and then the back end goes with this particular lender went all the way up to a 58% back end DTI, which is really excruciatingly high, because I hate selling people houses that their back end ratio is 58%, because that means that the things that are on your credit report, your credit cards, your car loans, and then your mortgage that you're taking out, is all that stuff's going to equate to 58% of your income. Now you've got utility bills.
Taxes.
Yeah, and you got utility bills, you've got taxes, you've got your vacations, you've got gas to get back and forth to work. You got movie night with your loved ones.
You've got your water heater breaking in the middle of the night and having to come up with $500 or $600 to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, and so many young buyers out there want to do FHA and stretch their back end ratio all the way up to that 58% or 56%, whatever that lender's telling them is their maximum buying power. That is where they want to be, and they don't realize what they're doing to themselves.
They're strapping themselves.
And I mean, as much as I'm a realtor and as much as I want to sell houses every day, I would love to sell each and every one of you out there, in our audience, a home. But at the end of the day, I got to sleep. I've got to know that you're not going to call me back, or you're not going to call Kingsley back, or call another lender back and say, look, guys, how did you qualify me for a loan? And once I pay my $300 electric bill, and I pay my $112 sewer bill, and I pay my $65 trash bill, and I pay my, $60 water bill,
the $220 Verizon bill,
$200 for your cell phones. Then you got your car insurance, which is $2,500 a year.
Not much then.
We don't have money to buy groceries for the kids. How did you tell me I was approved for this money? Shame on you.
It is crazy. I mean, I've actually, especially in the recent days, and most of that is due to what they call automated underwriting, desktop underwriting. And that's typically the only time you're going to see a DTI approved. And I, to be honest with you, to this day, I understand why they think 60%. I've seen one at 59 or 27%. And I'm just like, I can't believe it's approved. Nonetheless, that particular home didn't go through. I think that was probably a blessing in disguise for them. They wanted that particular house, but it was just stretching them to the hilt. And on an FHA loan to boot, which I don't know if you are aware, but within the last six years, they've changed the whole mortgage insurance rule. that mortgage insurance pretty much stays with the life of the loan all the way through to the end, as long as you hold on to the life insurance. It used to be, once you hit that 20 or 78%, that it would automatically fall off, which is why lenders are pushing you to get refinanced, and they're saying no closing costs, no this, no that, streamline a refinance. Doesn't matter if your house is only worth $110,000. What they don't tell you is that your mortgage insurance is not covered for your loan. So all these people that are structuring these 59, 50% down payment ratios, there's other things you got to take into account. They may have a car loan that they've got 5 payments on. They may have a crap ton of nowadays you have to take into account every single loan and their payments that get affected in their debt to income ratio. So maybe they're expecting to go and get a raise in the next 2 weeks, or getting a new job that they were offered a raise of 10%. Those are scenarios that make sense. They adjust, you have a short feel better about doing that. But to stretch yourself out to 60% just for the sake of being able to buy a house.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the federal government that's allowing this stuff. I mean, isn't this one of those things that kind of got us into the mortgage crash of 2007, 2008, where we were out there giving people loans to the maximum of their income potential? Because back then we had a lot of B loans. I mean, back then I flipped houses. I would buy a house, I would fix it up, I would rent it out. And after they rented the place for 2 years from me, I would go back to them and say, look, if I can help you buy this home, would you be willing to buy it? And, we talk about the numbers, and ultimately their mortgage was going to be less than what they were paying me for rent.
Usually is.
And, so I would call my good friend over at Pendel Mortgage, Pendel's no longer in business. Him and his 4 partners sold out. One partner wanted out of the business.
There were a lot of them went out of business.
Yeah, they'd sold out the Tidewater mortgage and so on and so on. But anyway, I mean, he would sit and write up a loan package for them that was a B loan. I mean, these folks had a 540 credit score, $10,000 in collections, $20,000 in collections.
All A.
And he would write up a B loan for them. And ultimately, I slept well because I knew they were good payers paying their rent for 2 years to me. And just because they had bad credit, I felt that shouldn't prevent them from being able to buy a home if that mortgage payment was going to be the same or less than what they were paying every month.
Those weren't the loans that killed the market?
Correct. The loans that were killing the market were where they were maximizing people's potentials and going up to that 60% number, and then somebody loses their job in the family.
And that really wasn't even it either.
Really?
No. You know what killed the market? Neg Am loans, number one. Because
that's negative amortization.
Correct. Meaning what people were qualifying for, let's say, I lived in California during this era, so this was a huge area that really took the hit and started everything. $300,000 is your entry home. That's for a condo in Los Angeles. So I'm working at McDonald's as, the head bun guy, whatever you want to call it, and I can afford an interest-only payment or a minimum payment, which is what they were qualifying individuals on. So let's say the minimum payment due was $1,000, but the actual interest on the loan was $1,200. I paid $1,000, and that's what I qualified on. But that $200 that's supposed to be being charged to me based on the interest rate that I have in my loan is getting tacked onto the balance of that mortgage. So every single month, $200 goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up. And with the Neg Am loan at the time, it was floating with the market. The market was spectacular. But once it took a move in the wrong direction, now that minimum payment went up, the interest went up, and the Neg Am obviously went up. So the amount that was tacked on to the point where the market took a huge turn and your interest rates shot up 2-3%, because of the neg-am amortizations,
But
which
that,
they had.
you know, and that's a good point. But don't you think that a lot of these folks who were getting put into B loans where they couldn't afford it to start with, you know, a 60% back end B loan, you know, and you know they're city dwellers. They were going to be renters basically all their life, and you know they get the mindset of, you know, it's only a house. I go rent something else. So they really didn't have pride in home ownership, and they got this loan. They're paying their mortgage, and somebody got hurt. They couldn't afford the mortgage anymore, and they just walked away from it.
I think that's going to happen anyway. But honestly, I'm going to say I don't think any of those B loans, not any, I don't think the B loans were a cause of the market in general. Because the B loans in general performed. It was the, I'm going to call them B loans or Alt A loans. It's the stated income, 100%ers. And in California,
Wait a minute now. I did a lot of stated income loans back in the day.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I would buy a lot of houses like that.
Right, but okay, is everybody as responsible as you with their money, or were there people saying, you know what, I can flip a house too, stated income, stated assets, no money in the bank, 100%. Because in California, I buy a house for $300, and 2 months later, I put it on the market for $370.
Yeah.
Now there were a lot of people that successfully did that, and those stated income programs made lots of money for those people that did it correctly. But for the people that didn't do it correctly, you had stated income, stated asset, 100%, and then all of a sudden the market went like ceiling. Now you had people losing their house.
Yeah, and that I think was part of the crash was the stated income stuff. I mean, because
and stated income eventually dropped down to 600 credit score, 100%.
Yeah. Well, and you got to remember, like up in the Poconos, Pennsylvania, up in the Poconos, the folks migrating over from New Jersey, buying those homes up there, the investors and the appraisers inflated the value of those homes drastically.
Every single time.
And then everybody used stated income buying them because they didn't know what kind of work they were going to get into when they got to Pennsylvania. They weren't going to drive back to New York. So while they were in New York selling their house in New York to move to Pennsylvania into the Poconos, they use a stated income saying, oh, I work for myself and I make $700,000. And then they get here and their new business is only making $300 because it's not this. Pennsylvania, the Poconos is not the same market as the Bronx. You know, it's not the same market as Manhattan. It's not the same market as Uptown. So they were basing what they thought their income was going to be on the people in New York that they were their prior clients and that they were working with there. And
charging a premium.
And then they move over to Pennsylvania to Mount Pocono and all of the Pocono area and buy these brand new construction homes where the builders were just reveling in the fact that they could sell this $340,000 home to these folks for $780,000. And it didn't work out too well.
No, it didn't.
I mean, that market crashed.
It did.
It crashed hard.
It did. But now picture that market, the Pocono market in California and Florida.
Yeah.
Miami, Orlando. The market was so bullish on never slowing down, and the people were sitting there putting all their money into this and expecting it to go up $50,000, $60,000 over a couple of months. Well, come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and Lancaster County is getting back to that, Kingsley. Honestly, I mean, you can go into Lancaster City right now, and you can buy almost any home in Lancaster City for $60,000 to $80,000 and do a BS remodel on it, putting in $10,000 or $15,000, and turn around and sell that house for $120,000, $130,000.
You're doing it here in Anders.
I mean, it's insane.
It is insane.
There's no
California is back to where it was in 2007.
Well,
as far as value-wise, where that ceiling come up to, they've already reached that level.
Yeah.
They've already rebounded back to 2007, and that happened really within the last 2 years.
Well, Lancaster's been back to the 07, 08 numbers, my gosh, for about 3 years now, and we're surpassed them in Lancaster County. I mean, homes that should never be selling for $145,000 are selling for 150.
So do you see a crash coming?
In Lancaster County's market, it's right around the corner. It's got to be. I just do not see.
Is it a crash or is it a ceiling?
I think it's going to be a crash in the market again. I think we've rebounded way too fast.
But here's the question: if you think it's a crash, something's got to cause the crash. Meaning,
I'll give you a prime example.
Hold on. Before you go there,
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think right now, in the government, and I think this isn't going to be a business-related crash. I think this is going to be a physical paper currency crash.
Just for the record, I'm not suicidal. I'm just a man from the side of the river. We're getting into this governmental, conversation.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any way, but in my opinion, in the next 10 years, we're going to have Bitcoin. We're going to have some digital form of currency, in my opinion, and I do not see paper currency or coinage being around in 20 years.
Do you know what happened the last time we tried to mess with currency? Remember the last president that tried to mess with the backing of the dollar bill currency?
Yeah, they got rid of the gold standard.
Okay. But what happened to that president back in the 70s that tried to mess with?
He was lynched and thrown out.
Yes, he was. It's not going to happen. There's too many powers that be that will never let that happen.
I don't like the idea of electronic form of currency. I hate it because I'm one of those guys that has hiding places.
You'll be hacked.
Well, yeah, hacked is my problem because I do have a computer background.
You do know that they're already trying the whole, chip inside the finger deal?
Yeah.
Where if you scan it, it says you got $500, you got $500.
Well, they're already testing that on all your credit cards. You've got the chip on your credit card already.
But they're doing it in your finger. Yeah. As a human being. You're good for it or you're not. Yeah. It's not going to happen. There's no way. I see that being the next crash. I see, because right now, if we run all of the currency together that's printed and in circulation. We're talking about all over?
In the United States currency.
Okay.
The U.S. currency is, $2 or $3 trillion short of having sufficient currency to cover what everybody supposedly has financially currently. It would take them, 30 years to print enough currency if everybody said, I want my cash.
And you think Bitcoin is going to clear this how? They're just going to wipe it clean and start from scratch?
It's not going to clear anything. It's going to be the government thinking that it's a cheaper form of managing your currency. I don't want it. I don't like it.
So
that's where I see this going.
If you're going to do that, why don't you just pull the plug? The dollar bill is no longer worth jack shit. I can say it on the internet. It's not on the radio. Right? Wow. The dollar bill is not worth anything, right? All of a sudden, you pull it out. Let's say you put in Bitcoin or whatever you want to put in place as far as your new currency. Yeah. We're bankrupt. The United States is officially bankrupt. All of our debtors are no longer getting a penny from us. Everything you own or don't own is slate clean, start from scratch. Why not? Why not reboot?
Well, and I think that
it's going to be better than trying to sit there and dig out of a $3 trillion deficit.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know that the government wants to just walk away from the deficit like that. I don't see that being part of it. But I see the government trying to do this from the standpoint of how many drug lords are sitting with barrels of $100 bills.
Yeah, but you can't go down that route because what percentage of the politicians, probably 95, have offshore accounts where our money's getting funneled to and they're hiding. Right. So they're never going to let that happen because they're doing the same damn thing.
Yeah,
again, I'm not suicidal.
I don't like the idea of it. I truly despise it. But watching what's going on, I truly think that when Donald Trump is no longer in office and we move in the next Democratic president, which could be hopefully 8 years or 7 years from now,
Let's hope.
I truly think that is where we're going to wind up. And I think that that's why I say I personally believe that in the next 10 years, we're going to see another real estate crash because somebody's going to want to fiddle-faddle with American currency.
Look, I'll say maybe 10 years, anything is feasible, okay? And the only reason I'm going to say that is because what really happened way back in the 70s, put us in the buying or the reason the crash. If you know anything about CMOs and securities and the ratings of those securities that we sold overseas as A-rated securities, right? Which were all these subprime, awfully loans. The reason being is because nowadays it's simplified, right? It used to be you had brokers, you had secondary lenders, you had primary lenders, and you had the market. Okay? So all along that line, we have 4, 5, 6 steps between the home buyer and the person that inevitably was writing the check for the securities. Everybody was making a spread on that money all the way up the line. And it was all based on the fact that this was like A-rated debt. Right? Eventually, greed is what's going to get us back there. The way it's set up right now, I don't see the crash because we're pretty hard on verifying income. That is like one of the biggest things that
if you're a self-employed individual, you can make your own income and not have a dime of a touch your bank account.
That's fine. That's true. But you're still verifying or you're putting on paper that you made the income as a self-employed.
Yeah, because if you take somebody who works for themselves, and let's say that
if I want to say that I make $100,000 to qualify for a house, and then pay the taxes on that $100,000, by all means, I can probably do that.
Yeah, and for the average small business owner,
how many people are going to do it?
A lot, I think. I think there's a lot of people out there that do it. And I think that it's more common than
smaller than people.
I've worked with several people over the years that have done it, and
look at the circle you're in.
What?
I'm just saying. Let's look at a broad spectrum. The circle that you're in, I would consider a very small circle compared to the rest of the United States.
Correct. Okay. But I think if you can throw a rock out and you know somebody who's done it, and then you throw a rock out and you know 3 or 4 people that have done it that you've helped buy real estate with, I just don't think it's there's got to be another way. What's going to change, I think, that whole scenario is the change in taxation. When we go more to a flat tax system, and get away from the states charging for taxes, get away
if
from
we ever get to that, okay.
I think that's the only way that we're going to have a saving grace type of proof of money, because then you're paying on every dollar as you spend it.
Yeah. And I'm not going to disagree with the flat tax. It is the only way to go. I just don't think it'll ever happen in the political system we have.
We got Donald Trump in there.
You remember the last time somebody brought that out that was running for president was, remember who it was?
This is Greenspan, wasn't it?
No, it was Jerry Brown from California.
Okay.
And love you, Jerry, if you're still in office. I'm pretty sure you are. But everybody thought he was a little off the wall. And thus they aligned the flat tax and what he had planned for that off the wall. But there was a lot of people that supported that because it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Everybody pays an equal share. You work harder, you make more. Fine, so they pay the same amount. It's a larger amount based on the percentage. I think what people got pissed off about was the whole thing going around where, XYZ paid less in taxes than a secretary.
Well, that's
fine. Well, yeah. So, that's what everybody's like, well, this is unfair. I didn't make the rules. I just followed them and play along with them.
Well, yeah, and when we're getting back, anyway, I truly think that in the next 10 to 15 maximum 20 years that we're going to see a crash. Now, with that being said, in 2000, year 2000, I was sitting in the York Galleria Mall at the food bar, and I was a little younger at that point in time. And I had this old gentleman that walked up to me and says, "Do you mind if I sit down beside you and have lunch with you?" No, not a problem. So he sat down and we were sitting there talking. And he says, "Yeah," he says,
Did you know him?
"No, I didn't know him at all." And he says, he says, "It's amazing, that all of these computers didn't reset back to zero again." And this was in February, so it was slightly after the Y2K fear and all of that stuff. And he says, "But son," he says, "I want to tell you something. This is in 2000. He says, the real estate market
It's cyclical.
is going to crash in 2010.
Okay.
He was off by 2 years. And he says, we're going to rebound from that 2010 crash, and it's going to crash again in 2020.
That's a pretty ballsy prediction, but I think it's a little.
And he was off by 2 years on the 2010.
So you're going based on this old guy's prediction to you 18 years ago.
I'll tell you, ever since then, I've watched the market. I've watched what was going on and what led up
I'm
to.
going to agree that it's going to crash at some point because inevitably it's going to. It's cyclical. It's going to happen eventually, right?
And I think we're going to take a 50-year run like we just came
I think
off
we're
of.
going to take a long run as long as the rules that are in place currently stay in place currently. And the reason being,
Like Obamacare.
I'm not thinking that. The rules in place as far as from a mortgage perspective.
Okay.
They're loosening up the blood. Okay. Back in 2000, when I was in mortgages, and you saw this happen at that time, and that's when you saw the credit scores dip, right? That's when Alt-A existed and blew up to the point where there was 50 lenders all of a sudden out there with the next and greatest little tweak to the previous program. That's when they decided, well, we need to get our share of the money, so let's do stated income. And the next lender did stated income, stated asset. And so forth was down to 640, 620, 600, 580 credit scores for stated income programs. If stated income comes back, I'll tell you right then and there that I will agree with you, we're going to crash because inevitably the same greed is going to happen in the market.
Well, we already have some lenders doing a stated income product.
There is, yes, with much lower loan to value.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what I'm seeing on the market with stated income is
they've never gone away.
60 to 70%.
Hard money's always been that.
Well, but hard money really isn't the same as a loan from Wells Fargo at 60% loan to value.
Couple lenders out there doing that, yes. Now, with that being said, if the end-all be-all investors, or Wall Street, okay, where the money is being played from, those are the people that legitimately set the rules because it's their money that's being spent. Okay? So if they stick with looking at what portfolios are performing and which ones aren't based on the programs that are being offered out in the market, and they continue to adjust those programs, the ones that are not performing, meaning they're going into foreclosure or being late on their payments, etc., then, and we stick with a core of what we have now of verifying income, I don't think we're going to have a crash anytime in the future. But if that stated income program now becomes 80% and 90% and 95%, it's inevitable that we're going to end up back. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take.
Kingsley, you're a betting man, right? I'm willing to go on camera for a good crisp $100 bill that
You're saying
might be worth nothing.
Well, might be right, yeah.
10 years.
Bitcoin.
But
Because every day I go on the Bitcoin and says, if you buy 100 today, you could be a millionaire tomorrow.
Well, and I call it Bitcoin, but I don't think, I think it's gonna be some kind of sort of chip that.
Do you own any Bitcoin?
No, I don't.
Okay, all right.
You know,
There's your answer, folks. Jesse does not own Bitcoin, so I don't think he's all in on that.
you know, I think it's gonna be some kind of microchip, either finger, wrist, hand, something like that. You know, I don't know
Globalization.
what it'll be. I mean, but ultimately, you know, if you follow Apple, you know, we're now doing facial recognition scans. So if we're doing facial recognition scans with your phone,
Facebook already does that.
yeah, if you're able to do that easily and be that accurate with it, why do we even need a chip? Why aren't we going to just walk into the store, walk up to the camera, look at the register, it snaps a picture?
You know what? Inevitably, it may get to that as an option. And I just hope it doesn't get that way in my lifetime, because I don't want to have to deal with it. It's just like, I mean, it's as simple as police cars not even needing to run your plate to see if your plate is registered in your car's insurance.
Yeah.
Because the scanners that are on it will scan, 100 at a time?
Yeah.
And will tell a cop whether or not your car is legal. Without having to do anything, not pushing a button, not looking at your car and thinking, boy, that car looks suspicious. It'll automatically tell you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think by 2022, I think we're going to see some sort of readjustment, mortgage crash, real estate
What's the
crash.
$100 plan?
That we're going to have. We're going to have a crash.
What's your crash definition?
I think it's going to be worse than the first time we had it. I think it's going to be worse than 2008.
I was knee deep in the 2008. Okay, had an office in Woodland Hills, California, beautiful little area. Had 25 loan officers, processors, a whole lot of jobs. Okay, we had I don't know how many loans going in any given month, but I recall the day that literally everything just shut down, and it was literally in 2007 that it started. Okay, and it was Kingsley. We're not open today. What do you mean? It was a holiday. No. We literally closed our doors. What? What do you mean? We don't know. They just came in and they put us all in a big group and said, we're no longer in business, we're out of business. This is one of the largest Alt-A lenders that was in the market at the time. Okay? So, from my standpoint of view, I had no idea what the hell was going on with that. All I could do is say, okay, I need you to take every single loan that we have here, repackage it, and get it over to lender B. 2 days later, second largest lender in the market. I can't help you. We're closed down. And that happened. There was literally 50 of the biggest lenders within a matter of 14 days that shut their doors. That's how fast that happened. So is that what you're saying is going to happen in 2022?
I think in 2022, you're not only going to see those lenders, but we're going to see Wells Fargo. We're going to see.
So what you're saying is you're going to see pandemonium because no one's going to be able to go to the ATM and take action.
Correct.
You better have gold bars stashed under your bed, something that you're going to be able to value to trade to get your food the following week.
Guns and bullets.
Okay. And an underground bunker with agreements.
Nah, I don't know about all that, but anyway, you know, I just think that it's going to be worse the second time around. I don't think the first one was bad enough. I don't think the American population realized it. We went on to elect Clinton. We went on to elect.
It was bad enough.
Obama.
It was bad enough. And it became worse when they decided to sit there and bail every single damn bank out and put us there in the first place. That's when it got worse because at that point in time, after Clinton, as much as after Clinton, the one thing that he did is that I 1,000% agree with is you have you gotta have cash to play. If you didn't have the cash, you didn't buy it, and that was how he operated his budget. So at the end of his reign, if you will, aside from the moral and everything else according to, that was the best I think our country was in.
Well, we definitely had a balanced budget and a target to pay off the national debt.
And it was down
And I led you down this rabbit trail for a reason.
2022.
Well, we led you down this rabbit trail for a reason, because just like we're talking about with the country, just like we're talking about with the finances of the world, buyers who spend 60% of their income on a house are inevitably going to wind up being at a much higher risk of losing their house and going into bankruptcy, because they just really can't afford that level. Now, my comfort level with somebody financing is 60%. If I've got a husband and a wife, and husband's makes good money, but has child support on his rent, because when you got more than $2,000 in collections,
there's a lot of scenarios that make sense to go to 60%.
Yeah, but when you have a single individual maxing his or her credit out to 60%, and they have a stay-at-home spouse or a stay-at-home paramour, or they have no other income, there is nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when suddenly you go to the movies and you're watching that Christian flick at the local cinema, and you bump into your future bride, and you guys a year later are married and have a child, and she's staying at home, and 60% of your income was going out the door already on your house?
Well, the Schwarzenegger are no longer viable
because you can't afford them.
Right. Okay. The wedding plans, by the way, is a quick trip to Vegas instead of being married by Elvis, somebody similar, because Vegas is cheap enough that you can do that.
Well, and with the $49 flights by Spirit, I mean, round trip for $49 can't beat it.
So, and if you are buying a house,
and I do own shares in Spirit, so.
And also in November, if you buy a house, you're going to vacation anyway.
Yeah, if you list your house this month with Brokers Realty, and once it goes to settlement, you're going to get a free vacation, and that's I think a 2-day trip to Vegas with airfare and hotel included.
So here you go, 60%. You may not like, but you can buy a house, 60%, get married 3 weeks later in Vegas.
Now, what do you do for Junior's diapers and Junior's milk?
Mom and dad.
Mom and dad?
Mom and dad.
Well, a lot of us out here don't have mom and dad to fall back on.
It's definitely a risky proposition to go to 60% for a single individual that doesn't have ulterior circumstances that will put on.
And see, our government is financed at roughly 48% of their yearly income. So we're, $3 or $4 trillion? $5 trillion? Something. It's some crazy number that we owe from the government side in money that they don't have any way to pay tomorrow. Because of all the rest of their bills that they've got. So, my concern is that if you stand back and you watch your government struggling, and they're financed at 48%, why would you put yourself in a position to be house poor at 60%? Now, what I would say is come to Kingsley, come to your lender, and look at doing a 3% down conventional loan. And what's a conventional loan DTI?
Again, you've got desktop underwriting, which will stretch the limits sometimes depending on, you gotta look at it would take into account a lot of different factors. It's not just straight into.
So at 42% of your household income is going to go out, gross household income is going to go out the door first in paying your taxes or your credit cards, paying your car loans, paying your mortgage, all of that stuff that's showing up on your credit profile. That's not including your cell phone bill,
which I still think is, whether you're talking 40 or 59.5%, because we're talking about gross income, I still think it's a lot. I still think it's high.
Well, it is.
And here's why I'm going to say that. Because let's just take an average citizen making $40,000 a year. Okay? $40,000 a year. 20% of that gross income, let's just say, comes off the top, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got $1,800 or $800 off the top. Now we've got $3,200 a month after taxes. And I'm being generous because we're not taking a look at any federal or anything like that. Right? No social security is 20% off the top of your taxes. So now, 42% of your income is what, 1,600 and change, right? Because 2%. So now you're down from 32 to 1,600. Again, I'm still being generous, so I'm giving you fluff. And with that 1,600, you've got to pay for everything else, which is only $400 a week.
Yeah.
How much are your groceries every week?
Well, for me, being a single gentleman, I mean, mine's like 210 because you eat out every meal.
Man and wife and one child. What do you think you would spend a week?
I would frugal and go to. You're going to Ollie's and you're going to Aldi's and you're going to
You
DJ's.
could probably do it on what, 150 a week?
No, because you're gonna think about. Well, I mean, if you're going to the dollar store, you're getting your laundry detergent at the dollar store. Yeah, I mean, I think you could possibly do that for 100, 150 a week.
I am being generous and I'm now
because
So I am being generous with 150 a week, which leaves you $250 a week left over for every other single thing.
Yeah, I mean that potentially
could be dangerous. Again, if you have one thing go wrong, especially with Obamacare, or any other medical issue where your insurance isn't necessarily the best. One thing go wrong, water heater, $500-600. Heart breakdown.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I got you.
That potentially puts you into, I don't want to say default, but the potential to be late on.
Well, that's because your camera's dead.
And that's where
you're froze with the last notch just taking out. You're offline now completely. But so yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough, and I don't think people should be going that high with their finances on it. But from a lender standpoint, you can't tell somebody, sorry, we feel that's too high for you. No. But with that same token, that same $40,000 income, if they're out renting a house for $1,200 a month, struggling to pay the rent, and they buy a $130,000 home that has $2,800 a month or $2,800 a year in property taxes, potentially $900 a month, $900 to $1,000 a month.
You're saving, plus you're also getting taxes.
Yeah. So
is it putting them in a better position? And I think a lot of that you have to look at as a whole picture.
And that's why the government's looking from the FHA loans, the USDA loans, looking to make sure the house is in pretty decent condition. I always tell my guys that, the government's looking at these homes for VA, USDA, to make sure that you got a good 5 years without any major repair work or major maintenance work. Now, that's not going to do anything if you get a catastrophic failure, where...
And that's going to happen in any...
The furnace blows up or something.
If you planned ahead of time or not, you have a catastrophic failure, you could potentially be late on
Yeah, I mean, but the government's at least trying to put those things into play, that there's no peeling and chipping paint, that the floorings are in decent conditions, the roof's in a 5 year, roofing area. But I mean, again, if you're buying a house that's a little roughed up and you got 5 years left on the roof, potentially in 5 years, you could have a roof, you could have a furnace, you could have an AC, you could have flooring, you could have windows that need to be done, all in 5 years, at the end of your 5 year window. And then you're going to have to prioritize.
I think a lot of this is all based on.
Yeah.
Because FHA, how we touched on the fact that it was for first-time home buyers, okay, and or people with bumps in the road, okay. So, for example, somebody that has a 580 credit score obviously hasn't done things exactly to the T or how they should in life.
Yeah.
So they've missed payments. Somebody with a 640, 660 score that's paid every single bill that they have on time, statistically speaking, can account for these items over time, which is why conventional loans have higher standards than others.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I mean, and that's. But now you were talking about the FHA, and I preach to my clients all the time. We've got about 5 minutes left here on the show for tonight, but I preach to my clients all the time to not use FHA if in any way they can avoid it. I mean, if they have to go with a higher DTI and they have to get a lower interest rate to make the house purchase that they have to have and can't live without, then okay. But if you can swing a conventional loan or a USDA loan, even if you put 3.5%, you can buy. Kingsley, can you buy a USDA loan mortgage on your home and put 3.5% down? I mean, just because it's a 0% down loan doesn't mean that you can't put money down on it.
And if you do put 3% down, and it's still the same way. Let's say you put 5% down with a USDA loan. Okay, you get a better rate. Number one. Number two, USDA has lower mortgage insurance rates, so your overall payment's going to be lower. Right? You go with an FHA loan, as I touched on earlier, that mortgage insurance is going to follow you for the life of that loan until you refinance.
And why is this so important, Kingsley? Because I mean, what I tell my clients is that if you buy a house today at 3.75% interest and you have $145 a month mortgage principal insurance on your loan, it's the life of the loan. So what I always preach is 6-7 years from now, when your equity goes up and you've paid it down enough and you're down to that 79.9%, under that 80% threshold, and you want to have that PMI insurance removed, you can't just call FHA. So in 5 to 7 years, when you hit that threshold and that number happens for you, you're going to spend $2,000 to refinance your loan. You're going to roll it back into the loan. I mean, it's not going to come out of pocket. I mean, refis, you're usually rolling it into the loan. But now suddenly, instead of having your 3.75% interest, now you've got 5.75%. So now the savings that you were going to see of $130 a month is diminished potentially to next to nothing because you've added $2,000 onto your loan. Now, is a USDA loan more advantageous because of the PMI insurance rates versus conventional and interest rates versus conventional? See, in my opinion,
sometimes, yeah.
In my opinion, if the house qualifies for a USDA loan, I feel that it's more beneficial for my client to do a 5% down USDA loan than to do a conventional loan because they can remove the PMI insurance.
As long as your credit is sufficient enough.
If your credit is sufficient enough, what's the difference?
Typically, USDA requires 640, although you can go down to 620 with compensating factor. Conventional 620 enough.
Is that not an override for the lender that you work with? Because the HUD guideline for USDA has no credit score regulation on
it. And technically, FHA can do a loan with no credit score. But in general, you have to have so many trade lines. If you have so many trade lines that were paid on time, statistically, you're going to have 640 above if you meet the trade line requirement. There have to be some weird thing on there from like 6 years ago that hasn't fallen off yet, but hasn't hit your credit scores in order to fall under that no credit score guideline.
Okay.
It's like FHA. Technically, you can go down to a 500 score if you put 10% down, right?
Yep. And I mean, we got lenders out there that do those.
You've seen we do. No
Yeah.
problem. It's regular FHA guideline. But what they don't tell you when you see that is you can't have any late within the last 12 months. And then it goes down a line of, certain things, bullet points you have to make sure you hit. And in order to have a 500 score and not have any late within the last month and still fall within the aggregate amount of charge-offs, what are the odds that that's going to happen? It can.
I'll tell you where that'll hit you. That is, child support. I've seen guys who have had stuff on their credit report because they had owed child support. The child's now 18, and they've been making payments on, even though their child was 18 or 19, they've been making payments on their arrearages. The arrearages fell off, but domestic relations didn't remove that from their credit profile yet, and in that process, it drugged their credit score down enough.
Small amount then.
Yeah.
I'll give you another scenario. Student loan. Student loans went into default. You entered into a program which they have. You pay your student loan for 6 months in a row. We will remove it from your credit report as if it wasn't paid late and that you're starting to pay it on time. But your score's already been drugged down. So on your credit report, it will show that they're current and paid on time, but your score's already in the crap. So It happens, but again, statistically speaking, it's a low percentage thereof.
Okay.
At the end of the day, whatever the scenario you think you are, I'll give you a quick summary, and you think you want to buy a house, at the end of the day, talk to a lender first and find out where you're at. Because if you're in any of these scenarios and you're not ready to buy for a month, 2, 3 months down the road, there's a lot of these things that can be tweaked fairly quickly. You can score back from different programs so that when you're ready to go, you call Jesse or another realtor, you find the house you love, you're able to write the offer. So don't find out too late.
So I always preach the first 2 people you interview and hire are your lender and your realtor.
Yeah. Very
important. And if you've got a question about the lender, interview and hire your realtor first, and ask that if you're hiring them, I'm assuming that you've interviewed them and you vetted them to the standpoint that they're doing 30 or 40 transactions a year and they're full time and they're active in the market and they know what the heck they're doing. So if that's the realtor that you're hiring, not your friend, not your cousin, not your buddy down the road that got a real estate license, interview and hire. This guy or gal is negotiating for your future.
Biggest purchase in your life.
When you hire that person, because that person's very active, quiz them. What do they know about FHA? What do they know about USDA? What do they know about VA? What do they know about conventional? What do they know about local programs that might be beneficial to you? If they can't answer those questions, they're not doing enough business to know what's going on in the market to really help you and represent you the proper way. So then that's the guy that you hire that knows all of that stuff. And if you're questioning who to hire for a lender, ask your agent then who you would recommend. And that when you're meeting with your agent and you're hiring your agent, once you sign that buyer agency agreement with him or her, that stipulates that everything that you guys discuss is going to be kept confidential. So at that point is when you puke your history on your agent. Once you've signed your buyer agency agreement, that's when you puke everything out, give them the good, bad, and ugly about your history, your credit, and everything that you know. So that way that realtor that you've hired to represent you and get you the best home and negotiate the best price can fit you with the best lender for your situation. There are a lot of lenders like Kingsley out here that can handle a lot of different scenarios. But as he said here, there are some programs that their bank just has not jumped on board with, whether it be a local loan through LHOP or the local Philadelphia program they may not be a part of. So he may not be the best lender for you if you're buying using an LHOP program in Lancaster County or using a buyer's premium service in Philadelphia, but he might be the best lender to use if you're looking for a PHFA loan, or if you're looking to merge, do a USDA with a PHFA overlay for a 203K Gov loan where you're going to 100% the loan with USDA, and then you're going to get 4% as a silent second loan on the back end to pay your 4% of your closing costs.
And that's where when you see these, it really is what they call structure. Because this is where you see, 1% down, $1,000 down. That's how these loans work. You got to couple them together.
Yeah. So, I mean, we want to end this. We ran a little late getting started, but we're just 5 minutes over. But at the end of the day, you hire your lender first, or you hire your realtor first. Ask for recommendations on the lender if you have any question of a good lender. But you should your realtor should not be suggesting to call, Joe Schmo's mortgage shop if you haven't puked your history on him first. Because if they're just saying, "Oh, well, this is my guy, this is my go-to guy," like, I mean, I'll be the first one to stand here and tell you, I have a go-to guy. But he can't do everything. As much as I love him, and as much as I love his programs, and as much as I love his shop, him and I don't see eye to eye sometimes because he thinks, well, we can do this for him, and we can put him in this program, and we can do that for him. And I sit down and say, yes, but there's a better program that could help these particular buyers out better for doing this other type of program which you don't offer. So I'd like to, I want to put these guys over with this other lender that can do this. But dude, we do 100 transactions a year together. We're gonna have more. Don't worry, I'm not running away from you. I just think that this particular buyer is benefited better by this other lender over here. And if you've got a good realtor looking out for you and your family, they should be listening to you puke about your financial history.
And at the end of the day, like you said, you keep using this word puke. I hope you're not coming down with it.
No.
I've been sitting next to you now for like 2 hours. But at the end of the day, I'm just going back to the scenario that you talked about with this young couple that was just in the corner. If anybody actually listening to this had anywhere near the same scenario, was it 30,000 down?
Yep.
Okay,
30,000 in their pocket.
They had 30,000 to go purchase this home, and they're looking back on their purchase. They're looking back on a purchase that they're coming up to, thinking, "Oh my God, why didn't I go down this road? And why aren't I in the same position that this young couple is?"
22. Wife's now 22 years old.
This young couple is. Where did I go wrong, or where did my realtor go wrong? That's why not picking your family that does this job part-time and does one transaction a year is not the choice for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's I understand that people have family friends that are loan officers, family friends who are realtors, and they want to sell their house or they want to buy a house, and they go to their family friend to buy the house. Their family friend does 2 or 3 deals a year. They're the manager at Wise for the rest of their income. They're not full-time. They don't know the business inside and out. They're not getting exposed to enough to really help you the right way. And that was their choice, that relative's choice, to dip their toes into their own personal business and not be a business owner. the big difference if you're working in the business or if you're working the business. I work my business every day. I don't work in the business. So it's not always the beneficial person being a family member or close friend or a referral from mom and dad. How many 20, 30-year-old fellas out there, wind up working with the 75-year-old realtor that helped mom and dad buy their first 4 houses?
There's a couple of them out there.
And then they come. I've seen this happen where they come to me and call me and say, Johnny won't show me the house this Saturday because he has other plans. He's out of town on vacation. Well, yeah, that's because he's retired. He's been out of full-time real estate for years. He's just dabbling in it. He's working in the business.
People say that they're not a good source of information or education. They always say history repeats itself.
From history, but not what's happening today.
Right.
They don't have their thumb on the pulse of what's transpiring right now in our market and what's hot, what deals are there, what programs are there. Can you imagine being a first-time home buyer and deciding to go with a USDA loan, which I think right now is about 3.75 for a mortgage interest rate, and saying, look, I'm getting 6% seller help from the sellers to pay all my closing costs, or pay my costs. Now, let's lay a PHFA over top of that, take a couple more $1,000 out, and instead of using the 6% to pay my closing costs, I'll use the 4% from PHFA to pay my closing costs, take 3% of my seller help to pay the balance of my closing costs, and take the other 3% and do preset repairs. Budget that money to be spent on new carpeting, new flooring, new countertops. Is there an issue from what you see? Because I see you cringing.
You're getting into things that sometimes are just not typical today. Now, what I will say is, if you want to use that money, use it to buy your interest rate.
Or I've seen cases where, we're doing a USDA loan. Where I've had a client where they've had a USDA loan and they had capital in hand. They got about 4% seller help, and they had the additional capital in hand. Their interest rate that they were quoted was and this is a couple of months back, 3.25, I believe is what it was. And what they did was they took a lender credit, even though they didn't have to. They took a lender credit for a quarter point, jacked their interest rate just a smidgen, but then used the lender credit to pay the rest of their closing costs.
Do that as well.
Kept their cash in hand close to vest because they wanted to do some work to the house once they were in.
Absolutely.
I've also already used balances of seller help to buy 2 and 3 and 4 years worth of home warranties on the house. Because your first year's home warranty with company, the ASH or what are those other ones? There are 360 home warranty. There's a couple different. There's a couple of different companies out there selling home warranties. They give you a discounted first year rate,
Right.
$300 to $500 depending on who the company is. But then your second year is like $600
Just
or
make
$700.
sure you shop for those too. Some of them
are better than others.
Are not worth,
Correct. So I've already taken people where we had $1,200 of unspent seller help because in this particular client that I'm thinking of was a VA buyer. The lender allowed you to get 6% seller help. Most lenders only let you get a 4.5% seller help on a VA loan. But this particular lender allows you to get 6% seller help on a VA loan. And we all know that the reason why most lenders only let you get 4.5 is because VA costs are cut down drastically on what lenders can charge, what title companies can charge, and what these different people can charge you for your closings. So your settlement's actually a little bit cheaper. And then you generally don't have a funding fee that you're paying depending on when you were in the military. So, a lot of these things are lowered. So we took that extra $1,200 that the fellow had left over, and we bought 3 years worth of home warranty with it. Use it. He called me back a year and a half later and said, dude, I didn't use the warranty the first year, but my furnace just blew up. What's the phone number for that company?
Saved them a lot of money.
Yeah, a ton. So nothing happened his first year. It was the second year that got it. So, I try and use the money because it's really use it or lose it.
It is. And just real quick, since we're on the wrap-up stage, everybody sits there and preaches about, these heroes programs, the whole 9 yards. But take advantage of the companies that do offer it, genuinely offer it. For example, I know Brokers has a program for the heroes, whether it be veterans, currently in the military, nurses, teachers. My company, GSF, does it as well. They'll pay, not only will they pick the appraisal, you get pre-approved, but they'll also kick back a quarter of a point to you. That can either A, buy you a better interest rate, or B, just go toward the closing costs. I know with Brokers, you can get that back.
Yeah,
after the close.
I think it's up to $7,000 after closing.
It's a huge amount. So depending on your loan amount and everything else, furniture.
Yeah.
You
generally see that money back with the real estate programs. You generally see that money back within 30 to 45 days after settlement. So it's not necessarily there for day one, as soon as you walk out the door of the settlement. But if you put furniture on your credit cards after settlement, and you put new drapes on the credit card after settlement,
and make sure it's done after settlement.
Yeah, don't jack your credit cards up pre-settlement. But let's say you go to settlement today and you need a new refrigerator for the house. You put it on your Lowe's credit card that you opened up after you got your loan closed, because you don't want to open any new lines of credit while you're buying your house.
Don't even apply for the Boscom card to get the 10% discount. Don't do it.
Yeah. So the nice thing is you budgeted for all of these things that you bought for the new home, and then you get that check paid off, and it's like, woo! I can pay off my significant other's purchases for the new house. That's huge. Yeah. So we like to thank everybody for joining in. We started this whole thing out about 2 months ago with Q&A for buyers and sellers, for new agents, and I'm sitting here watching, and we have just over 2,800 people live between Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube watching. I'm going to follow up. I see my list of responses, with some people, talking about their experiences. But we will follow up with emails for as much as we possibly can, and we will be back live. And this is the first time I've really had somebody else live on with me versus callers calling in to be online or agents calling in with questions. We kind of made a whole show of Kingsley, and I want to wrap up the show with the fact that I sent out an email earlier and posted it on all of our social media feeds. But Kingsley is a co-host on the Real Estate Radio Guy show on what radio station?
We're on 102.9 WHYL, but we also live stream on Facebook Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. You can catch our feed on Spreaker. All of our old shows are on Spreaker.com. We're on iHeartRadio, iTunes Radio, and we're getting ready to possibly brand out into a whole new market, which is kind of exciting. So look out for our rebranding and a couple of new markets coming here in the future.
And your co-host on that show, he's a real thin fella. What's his name?
Yes, John Rainville, broker in the central Pennsylvania area for many years, but now has expanded and growing to How many states now is John in?
I think we're in 5.
5 different states, offices all over PA. I mean, this is a great background country, so he knows what he's talking about. Great guy.
And I'd like to throw one other thing in there. Brokers Realty is primarily female owned. You didn't know that, did you?
I know it's primarily female run because at the end of the day, it's just like going home.
Well, you have John, who owns 33%.
Right, Jane.
You have Jane that owns 33%, and Betty who owns 33%.
Right. Yeah.
So it's primarily female owned.
Well, that's probably why you get that feel when you walk into the offices, as far as who makes the decision.
Okay, well, thank you guys. And again, check out the Real Estate Radio guy. Huh? What? I said, Joe. Check out the Real Estate Radio guys' radio show on their Facebook, or tune them in live. I mean, because they do have live call-ins, so they do take people's calls and try and respond to those. Now, it's a little shorter than our cast. Maybe they do an hour show, but I think with the new pickup that they might be doing, I heard through the grapevine they were extending that to an 8-hour day.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, but it might go to 2, or it might go to 2 separate broadcasts. We'll see how that.
An hour is just real short for a radio show when you throw in commercials and bumpers and everything.
Can be. I mean, especially when you've got some of the guests that we have on, some of the builders, anything from builders to electricians to gas lines. I mean, you name it, we try to dig into the real estate market in general. And we really do appreciate topic ideas as well, that we can put together, guest ideas if you have them. But we try to dig in and ask the questions that many people don't know, and that's what makes it refreshing.
Okay, well, until next week, Tuesday night, 6 to 8, and we'll be live again. I'm sorry we ran a little behind tonight with it, but we are broadcasting from the world headquarters here in Brokers Realty's fabulous Lewisberry office. So until then, thank you much.
That's the way to do it.
Sneeze. I moved